The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific. Yeah! It's Cartoonerific. Cartoonerific. It's Cartoonerific. With your host, Brian Mitchell.
Well, howdy. It is the Cartoonerific podcast, classic animated cartoons, and I am Brian Mitchell, and I am your hostie. That's right. Your bestie, your hostie, hopefully. Well, today in the podcast, we have part 2 of our interview with Jerry Beck, and a lot of you have been expressing enthusiasm about the second part. Well, that's going to be happening in just a few moments. But if you haven't listened to part 1, please go back, listen to part 1, and then come back and listen to part 2. On the Cartoonerific podcast, and you've heard this from time to time, Cartoonerific news, and then I would do a thing. And it's always been kind of a problem because I thought, well, if I report on something and I have, and these news bits get old real quick because news, you say it, and then next week it's old news. And if you're listening to a podcast from a year ago or 2 years ago and you hear some Cartoonerific news that I delivered, you might be like, I know this already. I've heard this before, So anyway, I decided to separate the Cartoonerific news and just do a separate short podcast of all these things that are going on in the animation world. So you might have heard them, you may not have heard them. We hope we have a unique take sometimes on when we do it. But anyway, I'm not doing it. Marjorie Stewart is doing it. She's doing a really swell job with that. So those are uploaded every Tuesday night. So if you want to, check in and listen to some Cartoonerific news, do so. It's we have about 3 editions already, so another one's coming next Tuesday. One thing that I do want to say, and I don't really ask for this before. Normally at the end of the podcast, I ask and I say, hey, look, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and the usual, and and tell a friend, right? And, I don't know how many people are actually listening to a podcast and then calling their friends saying, wow, this is something. You should listen to it right now. I don't know if you're doing that, and I don't expect you to, but I was hoping maybe in passing you'd mention, I'm listening to this podcast. I like it. You might get something out of it. But I think if you're on Facebook and you see a post from the Cartoonerific podcast about, a new podcast being uploaded. If you could share that to your friends, that's probably the best way of helping us promote the podcast. It would really help me here. I'd appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you would do that. And it would be even much better if you said something about the podcast, like, oh, I really like the guests, or I really like the interviews, or whatever. If you have, it doesn't have to be, all out praise, but, if you said something nice about the podcast while sharing it, that would go a long way. So anyway, I'm asking that, and I'm not begging. But if you do like the podcast, that's the best way of helping us here. So please hit the share button on one of our posts and then share it to your friends, and it would be great. So I like I said, I very much appreciate it. Anyway, we got the exciting part 2 of the Jerry Beck interview. He is a very enthusiastic guy, and he loves animation. He loves old animation, and we're going to continue our talk with him right after this. Don't go away.
You're listening to the Cartoonerific podcast, classic animated cartoons, with your host animator, Brian Mitchell. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
Well, here he is, the man himself, part 2 of our Jerry Beck interview right here. Enjoy.
And guys like us one reason I didn't pursue doing animation, amongst many, was, and I don't know if you felt this at all. You didn't, because you persevered and you got into the business. But I gave up because in the 70s, all the old timers were still with us.
Yeah.
And you know, all the people who worked on cartoons in the 40s, you know, and maybe 30s and 50s were still making the commercials, still working on the features. And for a young person to get in was very, very difficult. You had to be Eric Goldberg, who I knew then.
Right.
You had to be a lot of that young crew like Dan Haskett, who got on Raggedy Ann, which was in the 70s, right? Was I was around. I hung out at that studio. All my friends were working there. Also, it was in New York, which was lucky for us New Yorkers.
Yeah.
But the remember Tubby the Tuba that was going on in Long Island?
Yeah, it was New York Tech. Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. that really summed up New York and animation in general in the 70s. So that's why when somebody like Don Bluth came and, you know,
a shimmer of light. A shimmer of light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember that I don't know about you, but I was at SVA. Well, I wasn't still going to school there, but somebody invited me to that Don Bluth was going to speak at SVA, and I was at UA at that point.
Right.
And this is when this was a year after they had left, and as you know, that was big front page at New York Times News when they left. Well, and that never happened in animation. That something like that would be news. That was that was news.
Well, I have to tell you something. I set that up, by the way, and it wasn't Don Bluth. It was Mel Griffin from the Don Bluth studio.
Right. I remember that. I remember that name. You set up the thing at SVA?
Yeah, I'm the one that set it up. And so he came down and he showed some clips from The Secret of NIMH.
He did another one later, maybe a few months later. He did another one at
the New School,
which I have photos of me and him talking. But so I went to that thing, and I mean, if you saw it before then, I mean, all of us, all the animation students. First of all, he was a great speaker. He was fantastic talking about it. Number two, they then showed the clip, the owl sequence, right? In fact, they showed two clips, right? They showed the owl and they showed Jeremy falling into a box, meeting Mrs. Brisby. That was an earlier clip they showed.
Right.
And we forced him to show it to us a second time. I mean, holy shit. I still show that clip scene in my classes and students are like blown away. I mean, we were looking at the future, which was the past. We were looking at the future and I was like, we all believed. We were like, yeah, we need animation to go there. We need it to be. That was quite a thing. And then, as you may or may not believe this at the time, I forgot how one day out of the blue in my 16 millimeter department at UA, they came around with the transparency stills for Banjo the Woodpile Cat. And I'm like, what's this? And I'm like, oh, we're picking up. This woman had an accent who was the assistant in our room. And she was like, we're picking up these films, these animation. We know you like animation, you know. And I said, what's the other film? He goes, oh, it's The Secret of NIMH. I remember telling me the thing that my mind blew. My head exploded. I said, do we communicate with the studio about this? I goes, oh, I just talked to Gary Goldman. She was like telling me something. I'm like, yeah, okay, look, the next time you talk to the studio and you talk to Gary Goldman or anybody,
right?
Call me and let me come over and say hello. Okay, just let me do that. And because unbelievably, like 2 weeks later, I would have thought she would have forgotten because who cares?
Right.
You know, she comes over to my desk, goes, I have Gary Goldman on the phone. Would you like to talk to him? I go, yes. I go, hi. I've seen footage from Secret of NIMH. I was at the thing. He goes, I want to help you. I want to help. And they picked me up right away, meaning I did help. I helped in my own meager ways. But they loved that there was someone at United Artists who knew, who understood, you know, what they were trying to do. Anyway, and became great friends from that moment on. But man,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I helped them quite a lot. I got them into, there was a gallery called the Animators Gallery that I got them into. It was down it was down in Broome Street, I think, in Soho. And it was,
I think I remember that. I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember that.
Yeah. So I was able to get them into that. And then I got them into the Museum of Modern Art. They did a screening of Banjo on their screen.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was, I don't know, 1981. I did a few things. I got them.
My big thing with them, which had nothing to do with my real job at United Artists, was that I taught. This was way before people were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe they started barely doing this then. I said, look, why don't we set up things at Comic Cons, and we'll do a panel where I show, and I can show those clips that you showed at SVA,
right,
as the capper for they gave me slides. I still have them. They gave me transparencies from scenes from the entire movie, in color, plus behind the scenes stills and stuff. And I became Don Bluth. I became the preacher, about what this was, what they were trying to do, showed them the slides, talked through it, and then showed the footage. And man, I mean, all I know is I did my part, and I did it at many, many conventions in New York, East Coast, and I also came out to LA and did a couple of them in LA as well.
Right.
And it was and I wrote for their little magazine, Exposure Sheet. What was the name of it?
Yeah, I think it was Exposure Sheet. I think that they put out two or three different things, and they stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I like that they were at least thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, it was full color. It was very neat. But
I'll tell you another thing. We're going too far in this direction, I thought I had this in my collection, but I'm sure it's findable. I have the press book for The Secret of Nim, and the original ad campaign, which is the Hildebrand artwork,
right,
is great.
Mm-hmm.
The poster is great. The ad campaign, but when they opened that movie in New York, I can't speak for anywhere else around the country, they had the worst ads. They weren't the Hildebrand artwork. It looked like some 2-year-old traced Mrs. Brisby. It was awful.
Wow.
And this is why it bombed. It bombed. Their ad campaign and their marketing was so bad. They came out at a time that was bad for their movie. They made the deal 2 years earlier. UA was more on its feet. But in that 2-year period, we had Heaven's Gate, and the studio exploded. Yeah. And the people who ran it left, and everything went berserk. And so by the time the movie came out, the company could not care less about it.
Well, I think whoever was in charge there of MGM UA, I think they were just trying to kill certain things. And I think Secret of Nim was kind of like, yeah, we don't need this,
Yeah. And the flip side of that was that that was the same summer that E.T. came out. And E.T. was the big mega hit.
But Poltergeist was on the UA side, MGM UA side. Right. So that's
right. They had the other half of that equation, but that's where their money was. That's where their thinking was, the idea of releasing this sort of film. But as you know, it's funny that we're turning this into a whole Don Bluth thing. But as you know,
well, it's a big part. It's a big part of that history, right? So,
well, here's the thing that people may remember or not remember is that because Jerry Goldsmith scored Secret of Nim, he also scored Poltergeist.
Oh, wow!
And that's how. So Goldsmith went to Spielberg and said, "You should see this other film I'm doing the score for." That's how Spielberg saw Secret of Nim before it came out.
I heard about that. And I think what Spielberg said was, I didn't think this was possible today. And the one thing I do want to say, in the late 70s, everybody was saying they said, that will never be done again. There will never be animation like it was done in the 30s, 40s, 50s, ever.
Right.
I kept hearing that. And even Ralph Bakshi kind of echoed that. He said, "No, this is the future rotoscoping. This is what we're doing." And lo and behold, less than 10 years later, it all turned around. It all turned around with American Tail, and Land Before Time, and then Oliver and Company.
I'll tell you though, 10 years seems to be the cycle on these things. I still remember in 1995 or so. I'm going to give my friend, my good friend Harvey Deneroff, who
Hmm.
actually did to connect it all together. He did the Art of Anastasia book.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Harvey at one point said to me, this was on the cusp of Toy Story coming out.
Right.
He's we're in a, as you know, a boom. The Lion King. I mean, animation was at such a high. Every studio, like in the 30s, had an animation affiliation with a studio or animators making animated features. It was quite the big thing. And I remember Harvey saying to me at one point, even if everything went bust now, today, it
Hmm.
would take 10 years to dismantle all of the what's going on right now.
Right.
And guess what? That exactly is what happened because Toy Story was the beginning of dismantling what happened.
Right.
Everybody saw that's the way to go.
Hmm.
That's the future. And it literally took 10 years. If you look at the lists for 2D to really begin to disappear completely.
Yeah. You still believe that 2D is valid, like good 2D.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
Klaus was done on Netflix a few years back and quite good. Very
Klaus,
well
I
done.
love Klaus, and I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
talked to the guy many. I luckily in my role in my place that I've done things. I was the president of ASIFA Hollywood for years. I for many years, like 15, 20 years, I've done a lot of Q&As with the directors of a lot of the main features as part of my duties with the ASIFA.
Hmm.
So anyway, I only mentioned that because I spoke to I'm not going to forget his right name right now, but the director of Klaus and what he was trying to do and what he did do. And
Hmm.
I know that's one of many. I mean, look, I'm not against CG. I love that we're now in an era where it's no longer, I used to call it's puppets or dolls that are being manipulated puppets.
Hmm.
That's the way I look at CG,
That
Shrek.
exactly. That's the way I feel.
You know,
Yeah.
but we're now in a period now where it's gotten more sophisticated. Obviously, the Spider-Man movies in particular,
Hmm.
even the Charlie Brown movie. There's some, there's we're using it the right way. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, was a film I really admired. I thought it was great in general,
Hmm.
but the animation was so cartoony, and that's being pursued now. It should have been pursued 15 years earlier,
Hmm.
but it's now we have films that are different, and so much so. Look at the Oscar nominations this year.
Right.
Look at what is nominated, like Wish, which
Hmm.
shouldn't have been nominated and wasn't.
Right.
The I think 2D. I think people still feel the hand of the artist, even if they don't know what I'm talking about. Even
Hmm.
if you're not in animation, you still feel what I call the handcraft in hand drawn animation, and you know it's more connected to a human being. I don't think we like seeing movies like AI, that's generated by computers. I mean, it's as that people have said, so soulless. I think there'll always be hand drawn animation as long as we all have. Every human being has a different signature. You're all asked to write your name. You all learn how to do the alphabet. And everybody's got a different signature, and that's the way it is with drawing. That's the way it is with ideas. Everybody's got a different thought, another point of view, another way to do this. And there's could be beautiful hand-drawn animation in the Disney style,
Hmm.
no doubt about it. There's so many still great artists. There can be much hand-drawn animation in the anime style, as many of my students at many of my schools love and want to emulate.
Hmm.
But there's still room for originality, for someone who does it their way, differently, whatever that is.
Right.
I'm so happy that this year, I don't know, it's not going to win. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not going to win. But I'm so happy that Robot Dreams
Uh-huh.
was nominated. It's a small film.
Right.
It's very individualistic. It's adapted from a graphic novel, and it looks like the graphic novel. It doesn't look like anything special if you just look at the stills. But my goodness, it doesn't have any dialogue. It's all told in images. It's all told through the animation. It's a great film, thoroughly worthy of being an Oscar nominee. And I love that sort of thing. I love that those films can come out of the pack and be recognized. So no one should be downhearted by CG. I think we've gotten past it now, and
Right.
I think we're heading for some good new things. Yeah.
I think Europe accepts the 2D animation more than we accept it here for new stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
And
because they never lost that what I call graphic novel love. Back in the 70s when I said everything was at its worst, but that was the period of Metal Hurrent and heavy metal, the comics. That was the period of, I had learned then that comics were not aimed at children in other countries, as they were in America.
Right.
And I think, and that was true of the animated films. Remember Light Years and films that we would get in from Europe every once in a while, very, very rarely back in the 70s.
Right.
It even gave to me, in my opinion, it gave Japan an opportunity to develop itself to where it got to. In my opinion, the Japanese Snow White is Akira. Animation sort of was going in the direction in the 30s because of Disney towards Snow White.
Right.
And then we kind of hit that plateau. And although Disney did other things that were revolutionary and advanced the field even further, Snow White was sort of the changing, the game changer. I think Akira was that. Akira / the Miyazaki films of that period. These happen to be the things I was involved with distributing back around 89 and 90. But I'm thinking, a Totoro and Kiki and things like that. The Japanese animation hit a certain plateau there, and I'm not saying it didn't progress since, but everything before it seems to be leading to it, and everything since is off of it, in my opinion, one way or another. So,
I mean, anime wasn't very popular before you kind of started, because you started up Streamline.
Yeah.
With who was the gentleman you started off with? It was
Carl Mason.
Okay.
Who's passed away.
Okay.
The late.
Okay, but you really helped elevate it and bring it to the forefront.
Well,
here.
Yeah, it's one of those things I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I like you, or maybe again, I'm older than you, but I grew up with Astro Boy and Prince Planet and Eighth Man and Gigantor.
Yeah.
All those shows, Speed Racer and things like that.
Loved all that stuff.
And in Flushing, where I grew up, I think I haven't been there in a long, long time, but I believe it's even more so now. It's very much an Asian community. It wasn't that way 100% back when I was a kid, but there was an Asian population. We had Japanese bookstores that sold bound volumes in Japanese of Tezuka's comics. I still have some of them on my shelf somewhere. And that I.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the background. I'm looking at Jerry right now on the Zoom. You're hearing it, but it's mountains of books, and I just see animation books all over the place. You probably have some Blu-ray and DVD back there too as well. But that's the entire background behind you. So very neat.
Well, I need this is my little bat cave that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
But so I was aware early of, I would go to school and there'd be Japanese kids and they would be reading today what we'd say manga. And they were reading Japanese magazine. I remember them having Speed Racer or Astro Boy on the cover. And I'm like, and it clicked in my head, oh, those cartoons that look that way are Japanese. I knew that early on.
Right.
And so later, I had been going to Comic Cons since I was 13, which was 1968. And so by 1975, because I was collecting films, Leonard Maltin animation, I started doing the film shows before video. I used to run 16 millimeter at Comic Cons. And I was doing them for Phil Suling in New York and Creation Cons in New York.
Yeah.
And so I was amassing my collection. I would go in the mid 70s. I would go to Toho and Toei, who had offices in Manhattan, and I would make an appointment and they would see me and I tell them what I was doing, and I'd like to borrow some films, and they loaned me 16 millimeter mint condition because they had them. They were trying to sell them in America, but they couldn't.
Right.
But they were trying. And they had 16 millimeter giant robot shows and things, and I would bring them in Japanese, no subtitles, no English dub, to the Comic Cons, and these were the first times like the audience was going crazy seeing this stuff because we didn't see it in this country.
Sure.
And as you may recall, Brian, I think you're about to tell me, maybe, there used to be UHF channels in New York, right? That ran on Saturday nights. They used to run some, I forgot what they call them now, the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger like shows,
right?
The Rangers, and
yes,
and they ran some of the giant robot shows in Japanese on a UHF channel in New York. That was the only way you could see that stuff.
Sure.
And the so there was this interest building by fans in the Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
And I got more involved with it. Long story short, having worked for United Artists Classics and Orion, I would occasionally go up to my bosses and say, "Hey, there's this new film." They wouldn't know who I was talking about. I'd have them screen it. They would humor me and screen the new Tezuka film or something. And
wow. And
they go, "Jerry, we don't distribute Saturday morning cartoons. That's not what we do. We're distributing." I worked on Akira Kurosawa's Ran. That was a film I was involved with distributing. That was what they would distribute from Japan.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So, when I moved out to L.A. Again, I won't go into the whole Streamline story, but met Carl Masick, who had been dubbing Robotech and many other things for Harmony Gold.
Mm-hmm.
And we were aware that there were some English dubs of Castle in the Sky and a few things out there and I went up to him one day and I said, "Look, I've been doing film distribution for 10 years. And if I had one of these Japanese anime films in English or even with subtitles, I could put them in movie theaters because I know how to do that now."
Right.
And we talked about it for like a year. And then we went to Tokuma Shoten, which was the publisher of Miyazaki at the time. This is technically before Studio Ghibli was established. Mm-hmm. We went up to them and we said, "We know you have an English dub because they ran it at the AFM, the American Film Market. And if you gave us that print, I could book it in movie theaters and we'd make money. And then you could use the reviews that we get in the newspapers for you to sell it to a home video company because that's where the money was."
Right. And
they bought it. They said, "All right." And they were like, "While you're at it, we know Carl dubs. Could you guys dub this little film we have called Totoro, and which hadn't come out yet, and Kiki's Delivery Service?" I said, "Yeah, we can dub that. We can do that." That was the first thing we did as a company was dub these films and then take Castle in the Sky and get it bookings, of which I got them reviewed on Entertainment Tonight, courtesy of Leonard Maltin.
Wow.
And so we looked really good to them. And long story short, all the Japanese distributors, I never went to Japan in my life yet. All of them had offices in LA. All of them were trying to do the same thing, get their films sold somehow in the United States. They couldn't, no matter how much they tried. We were the only people interested in any of this. And we literally had the Akira people come to us. And I mean, we wanted Akira, but we had them coming to us saying, "How can you help us?" And so that's how we got involved with all of that. Of course, once we showed the Miyazaki movies in LA, I mean, you'll appreciate this. The nut that I am, I would go to, when it played in LA, I was booking around the country. But when it played in LA, I would actually go to the theater and watch an audience. I'd just sit back and watch people come in. I wanted to see who our audience was.
Sure.
One day, a Saturday afternoon, I went to the New Art Theater in LA where we had Castle in the Sky playing for like 1 week. Maybe it was even for 3 days. And sitting there, and in comes, I'm losing his name, Peter, the head of Disney Animation.
Peter Schneider.
Right? Peter Schneider walks in. He buys a ticket. They could have called us up and we would have brought it to the studio.
Sure.
It seems like that's what they did. Peter Schneider said, walks in, and behind him, I'm sitting there in the lobby, and then I'm realizing, oh my God, we've got like, it was like 85 Disney people, all the animation people. It was like a field trip.
Mm-hmm.
They all came in behind him separately, all paying an admission,
right?
And to watch the film on the big screen.
Wow.
It was, but I like to always think that was the day that the studio decided to get involved with. I know that Lasseter had a lot to do with it later, but
sure.
But they were all in on Miyazaki, and that's why when Lasseter took over, they started doing the Miyazaki films, as you know. They started distributing them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like that was part of my mission with Streamline was to do that, to get that, make that happen. I feel very good.
There's a Don Bluth quote, and it's not because, we were talking about Don Bluth. It's just, but it's true. It's like you throw a little stone in the water and basically, it ripples out. And I think, in effect, that's what was happening there with you, bring attention to these films.
I happily will. I'm happy if I was an influence anywhere with anybody about anything. Because from the world we were in,
mm-hmm.
I still think I remember you coming up to the UA offices and that world that's from that base
mm-hmm.
of that world that we were in. People who cared about animation were so few. By the way, there's another reason I didn't go into animation. I learned when Bluth and Secret of Nim and Banjo, I learned then, maybe even earlier than then, that animation needed champions in the other places.
Right.
They needed those champions. They needed people who love their product at UA.
Mm-hmm.
Disney was built, on the fact that this is what we do, animation. So they had a built-in, whether it was RKO before them or Buena Vista from the 50s, it was a built-in thing to take animation seriously. That was not the case anywhere, at any other studio, in any other situation.
Right.
And I feel like that was where I found my place. I did work for Disney. We'll have to do a second half of this if you want to.
We will.
I did work for Disney in 1997, 98, around the time when I want to say Disney Channel, but no, it was Toon Disney. Remember when Toon Disney was launched?
Yes.
I happened to be there around that time, and I was actually involved with that. And Toon Disney, right? And I learned before that, if you don't have people who are involved with animation, okay, what I was going to say about working for Disney was I didn't last long at Disney. I had a year contract
mm-hmm.
that I fulfilled. But the thing is, I never have any feeling to work for Disney. And look, if somebody called me up, I wouldn't turn it down. But the thing is, Disney doesn't need me. The company, one thing I learned was that a lot of people there were indoctrinated. They all loved animation. They all loved Disney animation.
Mm-hmm.
But every other studio, why I've mainly concentrated on, I never wrote a book solely about Disney. There might be Disney in one or two of my books.
Right.
And I teach about Disney, but I don't write about Disney, and I could. In fact, I have some great ideas for books I'd love to do that relate to Disney.
Right.
But the thing is, the other studios needed my help. There's nobody at Warner Brothers. There's nobody at Universal. There's nobody. They don't know anything about their libraries. There's certainly nobody at Paramount, Fleischer's, Terry. They don't know what that stuff is.
Right.
And that's where, I, go in. And I've told the story before when we did the first Golden Collection for Looney Tunes. Maybe we did the first two.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're great. They're great collections, by the way. They're wonderful. Because you're on that on the.
I was
all over
like,
that.
I would call myself an uncredited producer of those sets because I everything you see is I had a hand in, especially the bonus material.
Sure.
And because nobody knew. Who knew of some of this stuff? Who knew about Orange Blossoms for Violet? If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's a short on there.
Right.
Nobody knew about it. I mentioned it to Chuck Jones, and he was like, "What was that?" I had to remind him. He said, "Your name is on it." I said, oh yeah, I do remember doing that. Like nobody remembers these things.
Mhm.
So anyway, when I did the first two, I just decided on my own. I said, you know what? Let's see if any of the other studios would be interested in this. And I went to several studios, but mainly the one that worked was I went to Universal, and I didn't know the people there from Adam. I just cold called whoever the president was. I sent an email. I went online. I found out who the president of Universal Home Video was, and I wrote the guy a letter. A little letter. I knew what I was doing. I really wrote a really concise, short letter. Like I was behind these Warner Brothers collection, and we did this, and blah blah blah. And you have Woody Woodpecker, and you have Lantz, and I can design a great set for you. They said, "Come in and talk to us." And I came in and I showed them what I made up, what I would do, and cut to the chase. It's volume 1 of Woody Woodpecker and Friends on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
Some of your listeners may have.
It's a great. Well, I have it. It's a great set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I walked in there and I met everybody, they said we were thinking of putting out Woody Woodpecker, and their plan. And I'll bet there's somebody in your audience who say, well, gee, they should have just done what he did instead of what Jerry Beck suggested. But what they were going to do was they were going to put out all the Woody Woodpecker cartoons from 1940 to 1972 in one gigantic crazy set. That was what they were going to do.
Right.
And I said, well, what if it's successful? Well, we hope it is. I go, but you have no sequel. You can't do a volume 2. You can't do a volume 3. You can't do any more.
Right.
And I said, and you're not using the rest of your library. And I actually said, this was around the time of the Al Michaels, Oswald the Rabbit.
Yes.
And I said, you own Oswald cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we could put those on, which, by the way, there's a lot of confusion about that. Universal owns Oswald, and they certainly own the Lantz ones.
Right.
So, but they didn't even know that. So I'm like, you can put those on. I said, and working in my favor it was the year that Happy Feet came out, and it was either out or just won the Oscar. Right? Remember that movie?
Yes, I do.
Penguin?
Yeah.
So I said, you've got a character named Chili Willy, who's a penguin. I swore their eyes lit up because it was Happy Feet was the and I'm like, we do? I'm like, yeah. So and I gave them this whole plan for what it could be, and that's it. They bought it. I mean, So I went in there. I got paid to be a consultant to help design what they were going to do.
Right.
And we did that, and then it sold well, and then that allowed for a volume 2. Unfortunately, when volume 2 came out, that was the beginning. People don't remember that was the beginning of the end of even though DVD is still with us, DVD sales started to go down around that time.
Right.
So that was a similar from that period, but it took more years to make happen. Was the Mighty Mouse, the Ralph Bakshi set?
Yeah,
the Mighty Mouse Adventures on DVD. I went into Viacom. I said this thing. I went in originally to try to get them to put just Terry Toons out in general, just the old one. And
God, somebody should buy those things. Somebody should buy those things and put them out.
I have not given up. Believe me, throughout the years, I have done so many things related to that. So the ultimately, I said, okay, you got this, you got that, and then finally I went back in like a third meeting, a fourth meeting, and trying to make this happen. I talked them into the idea of doing the Bakshi set. Right. And which is a good thing to talk them into, because they had to go back to all the original material. That was finished, as you may know, on video. So it wasn't it wasn't cut negative, like old cartoons would be, they literally had to go back in and reconstruct it to put it out on video, which is a very expensive thing.
Sure.
And I went in there and I came up with this whole plan. I said we could have some bonus material that could be old Mighty Mouse cartoons, and which was really my thing. And then I said we can also do a documentary. That's the people, we could talk to all the people who work there, and their attitude is like, who cares? I go, yeah, but the people who work there then are Bruce Timm, who did Batman the animated series, is Andrew Stanton, who did Finding Nemo. Yep. I went through the whole laundry list of people who worked on that show. Right. And they were like, and you can get them on camera. I think I can. And we did this documentary that's on there. It's a half hour long. I get a little animation consultant credit, but I was involved because I had to call everybody. And Bruce, I think it was in particular, had a video camera back in those days, which we all didn't have in our pockets like we do today.
Yeah.
And he said, I took video at the studio. You want to use it? I go, yeah. And you'll see a lot of this video of around the studio that was taken by Bruce Timm.
Yeah. I worked on that show. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember that you did. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Worked on the Bat and did some fun stuff with the cow.
I love that they allowed everybody to use their own style, so to speak, for the layouts, I kind of remember that yours was more classic Terry Toons, whereas they had other people who were just doing different things.
Well, everybody was kind of going off doing their own thing, but we had a lot of great talent on that, and it was Tom Minton worked on it.
Oh yeah. All my friends, Mike Kazala.
Yeah, Mike Kazala.
Jeff Pigeon, who I'm still in touch with.
Yeah.
Who still works at Pixar.
And is it Jeff Reardon? Jim Reardon. Jim Reardon worked on it, who went on to work on The Simpsons as a story guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then ended up, I don't know where he is right now, but he ended up at Disney working on like Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph.
That's right. And then Vicki Jensen, who ended up directing.
Yeah.
She directed over DreamWorks and doing.
Yeah, it was an all-star cast. It was.
It really was. Really was.
Do you remember? I mean, my thing was I don't remember what I was doing exactly. I think that was when I came out here to work for Terry Thorne. I worked on the Tournée of Animation and Animation Magazine, and I did it. There's a whole bunch of my life that we haven't gotten to.
Well, you helped create Animation Magazine, right? You're one of the
Well, what happened was Terry. This guy named Terry Thorne, who worked at Landmark Theaters, and they decided to distribute animation packages to theaters around the country. So you could see, like we used to have in New York, we would have it at the Museum of Modern Art. We'd have like a best of Annecy show, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So they wanted to do that at art theaters all around the country. And they found me in New York. They found me doing that for Orion Pictures. And I knew distribution and I knew animation. So I was like the perfect guy they could hire.
Right.
And they brought me out. I wanted to move to LA, to be honest. And we did that. We not only did that, we did the Puppetoon movie, we did the claymation movie, we did a computer animation movie. And this is all before Pixar and all that. And I was trying to convince them to do anime, and that's really one of the reasons we did Streamline was anime was there. The Castle in the Sky was dubbed, and Terry Thorne was like, "Hey, we don't do kiddie films." It was another guy. So when I left Terry, I that's when I started Streamline. I said, if he doesn't want to do it, I'll do it. But we also Terry walked in one day and said, "Hey, how'd you like to do a magazine?" I go, "Yeah, that would be a dream come true. It's like a bucket list thing. I'd love to see a magazine, a really good animation magazine that when somebody picks it up, they're like, I want to work in animation." And that was what I had in mind.
Right.
Well, Terry didn't. That's, as you may know, not the magazine that was done.
Right.
But Terry had another idea. He didn't really care about any of that. He just wanted a magazine that we could sell advertising through. That was the whole game plan.
Right.
I get it. That's what you think. So I was in at the beginning of Animation Magazine. I was one of its first editors. I ended up writing for it in its first year or two a lot. But that magazine was also one of our bones of contention and why I left to start Streamline, because I had in my head what the magazine could have been. And it was not that. It was not what we were doing.
Right.
So, plus I wanted to distribute Japanese anime, and I had all these other ideas on what it's like. I loved what this company was doing, but it wasn't doing it the way I thought we should be doing it. It could have been so much better. The other thing we did at the company was we did these festivals, which were called Animation Celebration, where we showed animation. We have that here in LA now. Well, it's not quite, But in LA, we have a thing now that G Kids does called Animation is Film.
Mhm.
It's called the Animation is Film Festival.
Wow.
And it's November, and they run animation features from around the world. And it's great. And that's what we were doing. We did that too. We called it the Animation Celebration.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, it was, Terry couldn't believe it when I had to leave because he was like, Jerry, I know you enough that this is your dream job. Yeah, I've put you in your dream job, perfect thing for you. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not what I want to do. And I said, I even said to him prophetically, I said, Terry, someday you won't be doing this anymore, and I will still be involved with animation.
Right.
And I because that was not his thing, but it was my thing.
Right.
And I loved it so much, I kind of had to leave and pursue my own interests, And as you know, we'll leave it as a cliffhanger, future one. But I went off from there, did Streamline. I later did work for Harvey Entertainment and produced the Baby Huey show. I left there to part of the beginning of Nickelodeon movies for 3 years. Then I went to Disney. On and on and on. I don't have any regrets about my career.
No, and you shouldn't, because everything is kind of like, help push things along. And
I've had people who, why'd you leave Nickelodeon? It seems like a great job. And, because I had to do more, I had to do other things. I'll tell you, I'm so proud of one of my colleagues when I worked I'm really getting off base here, but when I worked for Nick Movies, one of my daily colleagues is a woman named Julia Pister, who's gone on to produce animated features. She did the Magician's Elephant for Netflix. But she was like my companion. She was developing live action movies like Harriet the Spy and Good Burger, and I was doing the Rugrats movie and other things. We were developing a lot of movies that didn't happen,
right?
And including a Mighty Mouse movie.
Yeah.
And but Julia, was announced last week that there's this crazy 4-picture live action, Sam Mendes Beatles movie. Did you hear about this?
I've heard about it. They're going to focus on one for each of the Beatles, right?
Right. Well, and then I read the article, and it's like, and the producer is Julia Pister. And I'm like, oh my God.
There you go.
My friend.
Small world, right?
But that's what happens when you work in the business. People go on to other things, and the next thing you know, they're making the picture that wins the best picture of the year.
We can talk about a million things. I want to talk about a couple of things. You have a site called Animation Research, which I love. Cartoon Research, sorry. And then, but you helped start, or you were partners on Cartoon Brew, which...
So I haven't looked at it myself.
Yeah.
So go on.
Yeah. It seems...
Well, I don't know what were you going to say about it. I'm proud of it because I worked on it for 9 years.
Yeah, no, you should be proud of it. And it's pretty huge now. Doesn't it get a pretty big audience, Cartoon Brew? You're not a part of it anymore. I
can't say about now. It was when I left it.
Yeah.
I left it it was very, very high and successful when I left.
Right.
I left with a good, as far as I'm concerned, we settled. We were partners, 50-50 partners.
Right.
And, he bought me out, which is fine. I was going to buy him out, but it's okay. I'm very happy with what happened.
Right. But then you started up Cartoon Research, which is tremendous. It's a great site. The
resource. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm proud of that too. Cartoon Research is a modern day, I have a lot of influences for what it is. Those influences are not animation. They're film journals from the past. And, that's the way I look at it. It's like, I'm trying to do an online, today version of a magazine I really like from the 50s and 60s called Films in Review. It was nothing information. It was about, and Cartoon Research is an online version of that, but for animation.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's the way I look at it. I started Cartoon Research when I actually way back when in the 90s but not the way it is today. But I got the URL. I had Leslie Cabarga design me a logo, and I knew that when I would eventually be on my own again, that would be a company I would pursue.
Right.
And I did eventually at one point. And I started it, back in like 1999 or 2000 as just a general, here's what's going on in animation and interesting things about its history, kind of a website. And I did that for a while until I connected and partnered with Amit Amiti about Animation Brew to grow what we were both doing. But I kept Cartoon Research alive as a site. It was just there. I didn't do anything on it until I split up with him. And then I went back to it and turned it into the group blog that it is today.
Right.
And I have learned, I know absolutely that that the posts that are on there, some of them are trivial, some of them are major deep dive research. Shout out to my friend Devin Baxter, who's been doing some incredible posts. And I really shouldn't have just singled him out because there's so many good contributors on the site that I'm very, very proud and happy that they're doing what they do and are allowing me to present their work.
Right.
I have to tell you, and everybody should know that is a labor of love.
Right.
And nobody gets if you see any ads on it, that's me going to that person and saying, give me a little box and I'll put it on the website.
Right.
For nothing, because I love what you do.
Right.
So,
all your stuff has been a labor of love. You're doing something that you really appreciate, and you just want to share that. It seems, right?
Well, you got to figure out how to make a living somehow. I have to say I'm old enough now that I I'm okay now. I got it all figured out at this point. But
right.
As you go through life, you have to figure out how you're going to pay your rent every month and all that.
Sure.
And I didn't come from a rich family and
right.
that sort of thing. But then most of my books were work for hire, so
right.
I don't get residuals on 90% of them.
Wow.
So it's I pursued the things that I love, and if somehow you can make a living doing that, I lucked out. One thing leads to another.
Yeah.
You do one thing, reputation precedes you, and that's why DreamWorks can call me and say, could you do the Art of Peabody and Sherman book? Yeah, that'll pay my rent for a few months. Yeah. I'm making it sound like I'm broke too, and I shouldn't say that either.
No.
I'm not, but it's like it's one thing just leads to another. For few people listening to this in the future, I am working on something right now that it's a dream project. I can't talk about it.
I was about to ask you about that. I was going to say, what's your dream project?
And when it's announced, which will be within the next few months, if not next few weeks, I'll happily come back on and talk more about it and how long I've been involved with the project for about a year and a half, and I'm excited about it. Like I said, it's a bucket list thing for me.
Right.
So,
we're gonna wrap things up, but I would love love to have you back. There's so many things we could talk about. We just talk on one subject.
We really should talk about studios like you tried to do. Where we talk about what we like about the cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the top three for me would be like MGM because of Tex Avery and the Tom and Jerry's, but but Walt Disney, of course, and then Warner Brothers. But I love them all. Can I just interject? The Tom and Jerry, not Tom and Jerry. The Woody Woodpecker set that you put out. I really appreciate that you put out all the Walter Lantz bits, the 6 minutes of how we make a cartoon, because I remember seeing that as a kid, and it took me back in time. So just want to thank you for that.
Had you seen before that black and white 1936 Walter Lantz Oswald Rabbit thing that we go behind the scenes on the making of an Oswald? Did you see that?
It's on there, right?
It's called Cartoonland Mysteries. It's one of the bonus pieces. Check that out.
I will check. I think I missed that one because it was.
That's one of those things where I brought that up to them and they were like, "We don't know what you're talking about." And I had to do a lot of research. I had to make them dig for it, and then they dug it and they restored it and they put it on there. You'll see. Check that out.
Yeah.
the studios we love and the ones that make that we all admire, Warner's, Disney, MGM, they're the ones that had the higher budgets, really. The other ones had low budgets. Screen Gems, Terry Toons, Lantz. The one exception is, the interesting thing is that Paramount with Fleischer / Famous, their budgets were very high, actually, up until the 50s. Right. Their budgets were actually pretty good. Yeah. Now, and that's seen by the quality of the animation, but they were lacking in other aspects, the story.
Yeah, I think the Popeyes were pretty consistent. The Poppies.
Of course, the Poppies.
The Poppies. Yeah. There you go. Funny, like I said, we're going to wrap up. I didn't know this for a while. I was living in Wantagh for a while on Long Island, and Myron Waldman was 6 blocks away from me. And in Flushing, you were close to some other animators over there, like Howard Beckerman, and who had been living there for years, and I guess Dante Barbetta. Yeah. I know all of these people. I visited Myron and Wantagh way back when, right? Back a few times, and Dante I've become friends with only recently, right? Via the internet, and we've done some Zooms, and of course Howard is a legend, and of course I met Howard way back when in the 70s when he was a major part of ASIFA. I mean, he was like us. He was a fan, and yet he's an incredible talent, right? I mean, I love his point of view. I love what he experienced. He helped me appreciate Famous Studios more. We had many talks about it way back when, right? And we were talking about how, he would tell me how people didn't appreciate that, the animation, the quality, the product they were turning out. I don't know if he used those words, but the product they turned out was first class. Yeah, and he's right. He's right about that. And it's just a different perspective. Well, I think you can appreciate all the cartoon studios. I think if you look at their product and, don't look at the worst, look at the best stuff they've done, and then you can find an appreciation. I had, not too long ago, I went up to the New Rochelle area just to see if the Terry Toons studio was still there. And of course it is. And it's a market. And you can actually, it's a fruit market. And you could walk inside where the bullpen was, that big wide area that they had. And then you can kind of check out the front area, like the entrance. And I had posted some photos. I took photos like crazy because I have a feeling it's not going to be around too much longer. I think it's going to be, I don't know if it's slated to be torn down, but all these high rises are going up in the area, like across the street and right next door. And it's just like, it's going to be another piece of lost history, So
were you at that Terry Toon thing they did? And I think it was in the 80s. They did a tribute to Terry Toons in New Rochelle. It wasn't in the building, right? But it was in the library nearby.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Animators like Marty Terrace was there.
Wasn't Tommy Morrison, maybe? Tom Morrison?
I can't remember on Morrison. I'd have to really think about who was there. I took pictures. Yeah. And it was a nice little event where they had cells, and it was they had a display, and they renamed the area where the studio was. They renamed it Terry Toons Plaza, and I took a picture of the street sign. I don't know if that sign is still there. Probably not. But,
probably somebody took it down. Somebody ripped it off.
I'd love to have it in my house if somebody.
Yeah, sure. Who do you consider like the top 5 animation historians? And I have to say, I don't know if you were. I'm sure you were friends with him. Jim Corcus, definitely very important. Yeah, Jim was very important.
And he wrote for Cartoon Research from the minute I left Cartoon Brew and I started it up again to the minute he died. I mean, literally right up. Charles Schultz, right up to when he passed.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, he was amazing. But who else would you consider like up there as far as?
There's a couple of people that are obvious in the universe of Disney, and that would be John Canemaker.
Right.
My good friend J.B. Kaufman and my good friend Didier Guez. In the world of Disney, they are the tops. They are meticulous about Disney research, and they've done many, many great books.
Yes.
If you don't know their names, check them out.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's funny. I think it's a lot of the same folks I'm looking at my bookshelf, remind me. But
Yeah.
there's there's a lot of good people who are historians today, then they're not necessarily writing books. That's my good friend, David Gerstein, another Disney person, does meticulous Disney research, David Gerstein.
Right.
There are obviously people who did 1 or 2 books, like Joe Adamson,
Right.
who did wonderful books. It's all the usual suspects. I thought, remind me, and I'll see if I have an.
Well, Mike Barrier, of course, but he's.
Oh yeah. Obviously, Barrier is superfluous. His 3 books, all 3, including the one he did about comic books, which I highly recommend. There's a lot of animation information in there. That's called Funny Books.
Right.
Barrier is right at the top. You're right. You're right.
Well, I'm sure we're forgetting 1 or 2 people, but you're not forgotten. So appreciate everybody that's writing good stuff. So.
Yeah, what it is like I'm looking at my shelf and I see really good books on like one subject that the person wrote 1 book.
Right.
That's really great. That kind of.
Yeah.
So it's like how many people are kind of full-timey in this direction? I think all the people we've named are that way, and I think some of the writers on my blog may go off and be that of the future.
Yeah,
like I mentioned, this fellow Devin Baxter has been doing incredible research.
He finds some amazing stuff. I have to say, I don't know where he's coming up with this. I don't know where he's.
And he's out of. He's in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Oh wow!
So I mean, it's like he's in L.A. or New York or anything.
I should have him on. I should have him on to talk to him about that stuff. But I'll reach out to him. Yeah.
It's about doing that firsthand research is the thing.
If you had so this is the final question, and then we'll we'll hopefully come back and do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more of these, because you're just a fountain of information. Okay, so this is it. If you're on a desert island and you have you have a projector, somehow you're magically able to set that thing up, what would be the top 3 short cartoons? Well, the trick is, if you're on a desert island, these would be cartoons that in theory you'd have to watch over and over again because you wouldn't have any others, right? Yeah. You got that one magic wish of those 3, right? But
that person who gave you that wish is gone now, and you only have those 3 because and let me preface it by saying that if you check out my some of the columns that I've done for cartoon research, I did do a few columns like my top 10 Warner Brothers cartoons, my top 10 Columbia cartoons. I mean, I've done things like that.
Right. But I mean, I'm sure there's cartoons that stick out in your head like, these would be the ones that I would have to have.
Okay, all right. I did do a list, and I'm going to I don't remember the list. You're lucky. But but these things will all be on that list.
Right.
All right. Okay. Believe it or not, this is taking me my life to get to this particular cartoon as an answer. But after having watched so much stuff and watched so much certain cartoons that I run in my class, you gotta understand, in my class I'm running like the best of the best kind of thing. So I get to see things over and over again, and I have come up with a very strange choice for a Disney cartoon. And that strange choice is Blame It on the Samba. Now, you're saying, if you had a desert island cartoon, what would you? I love that. It's a segment from Melody Time, as you know.
Right.
But that segment is great. It has no story. It's just visual.
Right.
But it's got the artwork in it is amazing. And I love the music in it. And I just think I really think it's one of the best things the studio ever did. And you're not going to hear anybody else say that. They're all going to say The Old Mill or, which is wonderful. But if you're saying, if I'm on an island and I want my favorite cartoons with me, I would put the Blame It on the Samba. If you're asking me historically, that would be another set of answers.
Right.
So the things.
No, just the ones that give you comfort. Wow, these are the ones I really love.
The other I did do a list of 10 favorites, of which I'm mentally drawing on. I'm not looking at that list right now, but two others from that list that occur to me that also are not. Well, one of them is like, for example, I love, and I've loved it since my teenage years, a particular Robert McKimson Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Okay.
Which is Acrobatty Bunny, I think it's called Acrobatty Bunny, which is him in a circus being chased by the lion.
Right. I had that on 8mm Super 8 when I was growing up. Yeah.
I think that's a kind of a quintessential Bugs Bunny cartoon. He's being disturbed. He has to get even. All the gags, in my opinion, are very funny.
Right.
I like the whole darn thing. I can go on and on about it. I won't, but that's a cartoon I really, really like. It's now you say, well, Jerry, is that the best Bugs Bunny? No, there's other cartoons that are better in other ways. Right. But you're asking me, what would I pick? Yeah. Another cartoon that I would pick on the desert island.
I appreciate you being honest and not just going with the, what's Opera Doc?
I could have said what's Opera Doc or something, but no.
Or Duck-a-Muck not Duck-a-Muck. Yeah, Duck-a-Muck. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, my God, what I run in my class, I could talk miles about so many cartoons, so many Chuck Jones, this, that, and the other. Clampett is my favorite director. I'm going to say it, said it publicly before. Sure. Clampett is my favorite director. I should pick a Clampett right now. I'm not going to, because you're only giving me three.
I'm only giving you.
Even amongst the Clampetts, I'd be hard pressed to pick my favorite Clampett.
I'm such a miser. Just making you pick three. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the third one I'd pick, I think you'd agree on this, maybe, maybe not, is a cartoon I run in my classes, and I've never gotten tired of it. Right. That's the thing. Seen it a billion times. I never get tired of it. And believe it or not, it's the first Superman cartoon.
Oh, Fleischer. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, so many good Fleischer cartoons. I'm a fan of a lot of the color classics. There's so many good Popeyes. Yeah. I on my list that I did of my favorites, here's an unusual one. Okay. We'll stop with this fourth one, but it means something to me. A cartoon. Get ready for this, Brian. You're really gonna get deep into my psyche and my soul. Okay. One of the later Betty Boops, the one called "Baby Be Good." No, that's not it. Sorry, that was almost a joke because I didn't mean that to be good. Right. Baby It's horrible. I hate that cartoon. It's Grampy's Indoor Outing. Do you know that one? It's the one about she's with little Junior and they're going to go to the fair and it's raining and it turns into a Grampy cartoon where he turns the whole apartment building into a fair for the little kid. And at the end, there's a 3-dimensional thing of the whole apartment building with an umbrella that pops out of it. It turns around. And if you don't know it, well, Grampy's Indoor Outing. I think that's kind of a perfect cartoon in its way.
Isn't it kind of like they did a Christmas cartoon with Grampy, where basically he's taking like household items and he's creating toys.
Like that, but I like this one better because the big reveal in 3D at the end is the entire apartment building that has been transformed into a roller coaster, which is, you got to see it. Right. A little mini roller. It's unbelievable. Right. But also, I like that in this cartoon, even though Christmas Comes But Once a Year has that nice song in it, I love those Sammy Timberg songs. Right. I love the song at the beginning of this about "We'll have a barrel of fun" is the song. Right. We'll have a barrel of fun, and it's a great setup. And then he does it suddenly starts raining, and so your audience sympathy is with this kid who's talking about how much fun they're going to have. Right. And now they're not going to have fun at all. And then Grampy, who I love as a character, he's like and comes up with all these ideas, the music in it, the ending. I mean, to me, it's just a perfect, in a way, a Depression era cartoon, which all the Grampies were. Right. Where it starts off with something you can't have, and by the end you've got it. And it's just, I maybe it's me, maybe it's just me. Nobody talks about it, but I like Grampy's Indoor Outing, one of my favorite.
Well, there you go. Hey, Jerry, thank you for coming on here. It's been a pleasure. It's been a while. We haven't talked in a while. Occasionally I check in, but anyway, let's do this a little bit more And
We'll do it. We'll do it in a few months when you've heard about my news and what I'm up to.
yes.
And,
Yeah, let me know. Just let me know about that when you're going to announce it so I can look out for it. And then we'll talk about it.
I don't know if I can alert people in advance, but I'll try. I'll see if I can get you on that advanced list or something.
Okay, very cool. Okay, Jerry, you take care of yourself, all right? We'll talk soon.
All right,
Thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Great to talk to you again after all these years.
Yes.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Hey, that was a wonderful interview. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking to Jerry. He's a powerhouse of a what's the word I'm looking for? Of a cheerleader. He's a cheerleader for animation, and he's always looking to try to bring these things out onto DVD and do commentary on this stuff. I mean, the man loves animation. He loves classic animation. And so that's very refreshing to have somebody that their heart is really in it. And he's been like that for such a long, long time. So once again, thank you, Jerry Beck, for coming on here and doing that interview. And we hope to have Jerry back sometime in the future. Well, the old clock on the wall says it's time to go. Sorry about that. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, we're on Facebook. I don't know if you know we're on Facebook. We have the Cartoonerific Classic Animated Cartoon Podcast is on Facebook. And please follow us. Just do a search under Cartoonerific, Cartoonerific. It should come up. And please follow us. And if we have any news or updates, we post them up on there, on that Facebook thing. So please check us out. If you really like what you're listening to, please subscribe. Click on your favorite service. Not Google Podcasts, because it's going to be YouTube Music. So you can go there and you can subscribe there. We're not on there yet, but we will be soon. Anyway, if you have a friend and they like cartoons, tell them about us, will you? Anyway, I want you to have a great day. I want you to have an excellent week. And we'll see you all again next time.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific Podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.